Rev up your engines!
Well, here's an interesting Ford move. They say they don't want any more dealer markups on electric vehicles, so they want to sell their electric vehicles only online. They're saying, oh, well, they don't want their customers being ripped off by the dealers marking things up. They want to look good, right? But here's the reality of the situation. The dealer marks up crap, right? That money goes to the dealer. That doesn't go to Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company's only getting paid for the basic car. The markup goes to the dealership. Ford would rather sell their electric cars to you directly online. Everyone will be paying the MSRP, which nobody used to pay. It's like, yeah, here's the price you wanted here. We're going to bring it to you. Blah, blah, blah. Right? So it's not like they're being nice. It's just that they want to keep their profit, not have to share it with a dealership, because, of course, if they sell you a car online, the MSRP, they get the whole thing. If they do it online only, the dealership gets nada, and Ford gets the whole thing. So it's not that they're being nice to you. They're just screwing over their own dealers and making more profit for themselves and saying, we didn't like those dealer markups, so now you can only buy these electric cars online from us. Well, we'll see how it pans out, but don't think they're doing anybody any favors with it. They're just trying to cut out the middlemen, the dealership, and sell direct. And here's a quote from the Ford representative. We've got to go to non-negotiated prices. We got to go to 100% online. Yeah, non-negotiated prices, you know? Here's what we're going to charge for the car. That's what you're going to pay. It may look like, oh, they care about the consumer. No, they don't. They just want to get the money, more of it in their own pocket. And then the dealers won't. I imagine the dealers will probably go for a revolt on this. Perhaps they'll sue them. I'm sure the dealers have contracts with Ford that they're selling their cars. If all of a sudden Ford says, well, our electric cars we're only selling online, so la-di-da. Yeah, and then again, who's going to fix these electric cars, right? If they only sell them online, do you think the dealers are going to want to fix these cars that they didn't make any money on? Be interesting to see if they actually do it, and if the dealership's actually take them to court and sue them, which they'd be in their right to do, of course, because I'm sure they got a contract with Ford. Well, old Elon's at it again. He says he feels super bad about the economy and that he's going to have to cut his workforce by 10%, realizing that there's coming a recession. But he also says, and I see this from rich people throughout the ages, he says, now recession is actually a good thing. It's to clean our society out, right? The rich always say that. You know history, hardly anybody's left from then, but if you know history, the Great Depression in the United States, and it was a worldwide recession then, you know what happened to the rich? They got ultra richer because they could buy things dirt cheap now. They had money, they had power, they bought all kinds of stuff dirt cheap. They love it when something like that happens because their spending power goes up. Unfortunately for most Americans, they're living on credit and they're borrowing the money, which they will then owe and they will not have. People will go bankrupt, stuff like that. But the rich get richer when there's a recession. So it's no surprise that old Elon says, well, it's a good thing for society. Back in the day, there was a guy that ran a company in Buffalo that dealt with my father's gas station. And a big recession, he said, this is great. He says, what we really need in this country is a good depression to teach people the value of money. This was a guy who smoked cigars, drove around in a new Cadillac, never even changed the oil because he got a new one every year, so he didn't care. He didn't take care of the vehicle. And hilariously enough, back in the day, we charged $1.75 to wash a car, right? He'd give us $2 and he'd wait for his quarter change. This was a multimillionaire in the 60s. It was a big deal back then to be a multimillionaire, right? And he said, oh, this country needs a depression to teach people the value of money. So old Elon here, he's right about the recession. I can certainly see it coming. But he's preparing ahead and saying he's going to fire people. If you notice that thing he did the other day, he said that all of these workers have to come back and work in the office, and if they don't come back. We don't care. You got to work in the office. That way, he can probably get rid of some more people that he doesn't need. Unfortunately, any corporation, there's so much chaff that you can take away from the wheat and you don't need it. I remember my father-in-law telling me, he was a vice president of a petroleum company, right? And he said, Scotty, I could fire 80% of the people in this company and make it run better. He said the only problem is some of that is the owner's son and things like that, but there's so much waste in these companies, it's not surprising you could get rid of 10% of your workforce. That's not hard to do because there's so much waste. Unfortunately, what they usually end up doing is firing the workers and not the white-collar guys on the top who basically are the ones that should get rid of, not the people actually doing the work. But then again, who said corporations work all that well? And who says he makes Teslas well? They're poor quality vehicles for a lot of money. But he knows if there's a recession coming, people aren't going to be buying these $50,000 to $140,000 cars either. Not in any mass amounts. Sean Sally says, how do I fix my remote start? I'm in Austin, Texas. I got a F-150, 2019. I took it to get the oil replaced on warranty worked, that the oil cooler was leaking. When I got it back, the remote start would not work. The dealer said they couldn't find any issues. They screwed up. This isn't just a coincidence. Well, it worked when I came in, but as soon as they did the work, no, it doesn't work. They obviously screwed up. You got to take a lot of crap off to get the cooling lines off. They obviously shorted something out. They're not going to say they did because it's going to cost them money, but too bad. Say, it worked when I brought it in, you guys are fixed if they don't hire a lawyer, and you'll win. There's no coincidence in cars. It's a 2019. It's not that old. A lot of the guys that work at the dealerships are lazy. A lot of them are young. They have no experience. If you're going to take all the crap off on the engine to change that, the first thing you do, you take the battery cable off, right? And then when you do the work, you can't short anything out. I'll bet they did not take the battery terminal off and they shorted something out. The reason that a lot of these guys don't anymore is because they're lazy. On a modern vehicle, if you take the battery terminal off, everything has to be reset. Sometimes the radio, you got to reset the stations and people get mad. Oh, the guy messed with my radio. So they don't want to disconnect the battery. But if they don't disconnect the battery, then you can get things shorted out when they work on the car. And that's obviously what they did. They're not going to say they did because they always want to cover their own rear ends. They don't want to have to fix something that their guy's wrecked. They don't want to admit that their guy's wrecked it. But hey, come on. It worked when you went in and now it doesn't work. They screwed something up. Check the battery in your remote. 1 in a million your battery went dead the day they had it, right? Kind of odd, but it can happen. Check the battery. But if it's not that, they shorted something out because they didn't disconnect the battery when they did the work. And like I say, I see that all the time now because disconnecting the battery resets a lot of stuff. A lot of times then the car won't idle right and it might take a few days for it to reset itself. And that's the last thing they want is he brought his car in, it ran fine, now it's idling poorly. Well, yeah, because you disconnected the battery. It's got to be reset. So they don't want to do any of that. They roll the dice. Well, we'll leave the battery connected. Everything's powered up. So if we work and mess with the wire, and I'm sure they damaged something in the electrical system. Unless the battery went bad in your remote, try that, but I doubt if it's that. I have a post of what says, I got a question about 4th and 5th generation Chevy Tahoe fuel ratings. Have increasing fuel economy to get people to buy them. Does anybody actually own one and see if the fuel economy actually increases like they said? Tahoes are gas hogs. It doesn't matter what they're doing in it. And the rating, what you have to understand about the rating in many cases, is an absolute joke. There's a few guys somewhere in Michigan that do the rating. And they test, I don't know, like 4 or 5% of the cars out there. And it's all done on a dyno, too. It's not done. They don't drive it in the real world. So there's all kinds of questions about there's no wind. If it's a two-wheel drive, it's only running the drive wheels on the dyno. There's no friction on the rear wheel that's going to lower gas much. That's bad enough. But the vast majority of vehicles sold in the United States, the gas mileage rating is figures given by, guess who? The manufacturer who built the car. So a lot of it is total BS. Absolute BS. I'll give you a perfect example from my own life. Years ago when I was still in Houston, I got to try out some brand new Lexuses. It's the last time they sent it to me because they didn't like my reviews, but too bad. Now I just use real people's cars and they don't care. They want the world to see what's real, so it's better not. They don't like it because I don't say good things, because I tell the truth. Well, I had a Lexus SUV. It was rated at 34 miles a gallon. So I drove from Houston to San Antonio and back. I put it on eco mode and cruise control. It was rated at 34. I got like 23 miles a gallon in that thing on eco mode cruise control, and I didn't touch it the whole time. The rating is a load of crap for most of these things. And in the Tahoe, it's the same exact thing. Don't believe what it says. And if you put a hitch on the back of the thing like most people and you tow things, it'll go down the toilet. That's just how it is. The more weight you pull, the worse the gas mileage. The Chevy Tahoe is a big, heavy vehicle. It doesn't matter what they do to it. Unless they put an electric motor in it, you're never going to get good gas mileage. And even with an electric motor, it's going to use a ton of power. It's going to have humongous batteries to make it go. Big, heavy things take more energy to run, and they can BS about, oh, we're much better than we used to be. Most of their vehicles, they just tell them, here's what the ratings are. Most of it's total nonsense. Too fast for you, says. I got 2012 Honda Civic. Is my window regulator or motor bad? The driver's rear window won't go down. When I press the button, I don't hear anything. It's closed, but it won't go down. I don't know whether it's regulator or motor. Thanks. Here's a good test, and I've done it for years. Have a friend come, start the car, have them push the button down. It's not going down, but hold the button down. Then you go to the window and go beat it with your hands. If it starts to go down, it means the regulator's sticking. If it doesn't go down at all and you don't have a blown fuse and the switch works, of course there, try the master switch where you are and then go back to the back seat and try that switch, and you find the one at the switch at the back seat works but the driver's switch doesn't work. You know, that master switch is bad. You can replace the switch or just use the one at the back, right? But if neither make it go down and you beat on it, doesn't go down at all, generally you need a motor. But here's the thing. Things are so expensive when you buy OEM. On those Hondas, I often buy a Taiwanese or a Chinese made motor regulator assembly. It's cheaper to buy the whole thing aftermarket than it is to buy their brand new ones, piece by piece. And then you change both parts and you never have to think about it. So that's often what I do, rather than gamble, because if the motor's worn, the regulator's certainly going to be worn. If the regulator's worn, the motor's probably certainly worn too. You're best to just replace the whole assembly aftermarket. The aftermarket stuff works perfectly fine. It fits. I've never had any problem installing them as long as you go to a good auto parts store that orders you the correct part. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.